Hello. Hi, and welcome to the MA Application Roundtable. I'm Dr. Erin Elizabeth Smith, the Director of Career Development here at the English Department for the University of Tennessee. In this event, we're going to learn more about the ins and outs of the process of applying to graduate programs in English, including researching schools, preparing your writing portfolios, writing a statement of purpose, and more. Feel free if you are here to, as part of, to ask questions as you go along. You can either raise your little Zoom hand or you can ask them in the chat. And yeah, a big thank you to all of today's participants. If you want to learn more about the program or about the work we do, you can find out more about us at english.utk.edu. And now I'll hand it over to Dr. Ben Lee.
I am Ben Lee. I use he, him pronouns. I am the Director of Graduate Studies in the English department here at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, which means I oversee three graduate programs, MFA, PhD, and the English MA program. Here comes Ben Ash. Excited. Let's see if I can admit him. And we're here, though, today to talk about applying to English MA programs. And I adore our English MA program at the University of Tennessee. It's a hugely versatile, helpful program that allows students to come and figure out what they want to do in English studies. It's important to say that you can come do an English MA with us and you can concentrate on literature in any historical field. You can also literature, theory, textual studies, or you can focus on rhetoric, writing, linguistics. And we have vibrant programs in literature and in RWL, and we have incredible applicants each year in both concentrations. So grateful to the panelists who have agreed to answer questions and talk about our program and applying to the English MA program. I do want you guys to talk about applying to the English MA program at the University of Tennessee. You're here, you're thriving here, I hope, but we should also just talk about applying to English MA programs more broadly, because we do want to give like our UTK English majors, we want to give them the best possible advice. And when English majors come talk to me about applying to our English MA program, I really do urge them to apply to a number of different programs, to research some other English MA programs, and to give themselves the best possible opportunity to study with the faculty members they want to study with, and to get the best possible, funding package. So I do want us just to, talk about the application process in general as a service to all our UTK English undergrads. So again, I'm Ben Lee, Director of Graduate Studies. And now I will ask each of you to introduce yourself, maybe starting with, why don't we do, on my screen, I have Greta, Ben Ash, Maggie, Nico, and then Talia. Why don't we do it in that order?
Okay. Hello. My name is Greta Gessert, and I am a current first year PhD student here at the University of Tennessee, doing the rhetoric, writing, and linguistics track. But I just completed my master's here as well. So I have been here for a couple of years and have decided to stay on. Yeah, is that sufficient? Okay.
Cool. And I
All right.
put, oh, sorry, Ben Ash, if I mixed up the order, I put it in the chat. If you want to go ahead and then we'll continue the order from there.
All right, so my name is Benjamin Ashley, Ben Ash, he, him pronouns. I am originally from Ghana. I did my undergrad at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Ghana. I'm currently a second year MA student in the Rhetoric, Writing, Linguistics program. Yeah.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Maggie Warren. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a fourth year PhD in the program, but I got my start at Tennessee by doing the master's degree starting in 2020. I pursue a literature degree, but I'm also really involved in creative writing things and have been previously really involved in the Writing Center as well.
Hi, I'm Nico Hauser. I use he, him pronouns, and I am a first year MA student in literature criticism and textual studies, and I specialize in medieval literature. This is my first year at UT. I previously did my undergraduate at the University of Georgia in as a double major in English and sociology.
Hi, I'm Talia. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a first year master's student in literature. And my area of emphasis is up in the air right now. You can do lots of different things. And I did my undergraduate degree at American University, where I double majored in literature and American studies.
That's so great. Thanks to all of you for your introductions. I just kind of want to point out like Greta and Maggie are both now currently PhD students, but they got into our PhD program through our English MA program, one in literature, one in rhetoric, writing, linguistics. Nico and Talia are first year MA students studying literature, different historical fields. Ben Ash came from Ghana to study rhetoric, writing, and linguistics. And so he, like Greta, is focusing on rhetoric, writing, linguistics in our graduate program. He's a second year MA, and Eli Kibler, who's going to join us in just a little while, is a second year MA who's focused on literature. So even just like as you guys introduce yourselves and talk about your programs and your areas of focus, you see, the diversity within the English MA program where students come to focus on a number of different things. And I just want to mention, that in the English MA, you can focus on literature or rhetoric, writing, linguistics. We also have an MFA, a creative writing MFA. That's a separate program. You would apply to it in a different way. There's a slightly different application procedure, but there is a lot of cross-fertilization and MFA and MA students are often in the same classes and spending time together. So there's a great, we always have exchanges between creative writers, literature students, and students focusing on rhetoric, writing, linguistics. It's one of the things that makes our graduate program so successful and energetic, I think. And students have a chance, even though they need to focus on one thing, usually to be as successful as possible. They have a chance to spend time maybe taking one creative writing workshop, or if they're creative writers, still learning a lot about composition pedagogy, for instance. So first, my friends, here is the opening question just to allow people to think a little bit more about the English MA program and what it is and what it can do. I just wanted to ask you all, why did you apply to the English MA program at UTK? What were you hoping to get out of the program? So, if you think back to the moment you applied, why did you apply to UT's English MA program and other English MA programs? What were you hoping for when you submitted your applications? Um, I'll let you guys kind of jump in as you feel you have a good answer to my question.
I'll go first. In part because it'll take some remembering. But when I finished undergrad, I went into teaching at the high school level. And so, sort of the ultimate goal, even in doing that, was I knew that I wanted to go back to grad school eventually, but I wanted professional experience. And I knew I really liked teaching. And so, getting a graduate degree was really my route to like then teaching at the college level. So, in looking at different programs, combining that like I want to teach and be qualified to teach at higher levels with also like I want to continue to do research. Originally, I was drawn to Southern literature. I thought that was going to be my concentration. As Ben Lee, who's my dissertation chair, will tell you, that's not what I'm doing anymore, because I just found other interests that I could pursue. But Tennessee appealed to me because of professors like Dr. Hardwig and what they study within Southern or Appalachian literature. On top of this being a fully funded program where you get different professional experience while you're completing your degree.
That's great. Anyone else? Remember
I
what
could
you, go ahead.
Yeah, I can jump in. So thinking back, I did a gap year in between undergrad and applying for the master's, when I worked in marketing for a year. And at the time, I didn't know if marketing is what I was going to pursue, ultimately, or if I did want to go to graduate school. And throughout that year, I realized that I knew I either wanted to go into teaching, go back to working in writing centers like I did during undergrad, or get a more writing focused marketing job. And I sort of figured that a master's in rhetoric and composition or rhetoric writing linguistics, would sort of open doors for me in all three of those. And I also hoped that in getting that degree, I might also be able to narrow what it was that I wanted to do. And so in looking at programs, I looked for programs like Maggie mentioned that would give me some professional experience. So with an assistantship structure that would allow me to be back in a writing center and also to teach, which was something that was true at UTK. And I sort of just did a lot of searching for schools that had a program like UT's RWL Masters. I knew I wanted to pursue the rhetoric and composition side of things. And so I just looked for a lot of schools in cities that interested me, that had that. And that was how I ended up applying to UTK specifically.
That's great. Talia or Nico, do you want to jump in? And then I'll ask Ben Ash about applying from abroad.
Yeah, I can jump in, or Tall if you want to first.
You can go ahead.
Okay, well, I was gonna say for me, I did not take a gap year. I knew that I wanted to go to grad school specifically because I did not want to have to go try to find a job, and I felt like I still didn't know where I wanted to go in my career. So when I was applying for schools, I wanted to find a school where I could go into an area that I really liked, but not be constrained by that and have the opportunity to take classes in different historical fields. So that way I could be sure that if I decided to get a PhD or wanted to go out, I knew exactly, like I had the experience of being in different areas. And so for me, like coming to UT, I really liked how it was set up in a way that I would be able to kind of get experience in different fields, like slightly separate from my own, while still doing my own research. And the program also had like a lot of affiliate programs, like for medieval, there's like the Marco Institute for Medieval and Renaissance Studies. And so even being within the English department, I also have the opportunity to expand outwards and get both the amazing opportunities that the English department has for professionalization, but also that these kind of affiliate other aspects of UT offer as well.
Talia, go ahead. I could tell
Yeah,
you.
that's okay. To add on to what others have said, I knew when I was in undergrad that I wanted to ultimately end up in grad school, and I also knew that I didn't want to go right away. And I was at the time interested in the 18th century because that's what I had a lot of exposure to in undergrad. And one of my professors is friends with Dr. Anderson on Facebook, and she posted that they had a fully funded program at the University of Tennessee. My professor told me about it, and I sort of put it in the back of my mind. And then when I was ready to apply, I knew that I wanted to go somewhere that was fully funded. And I remembered that the University of Tennessee had a fully funded program. So I think that's what initially drew me to the program. And then I started to feel excited about going to school I went to undergrad in DC. So going to school somewhere a little bit different and also somewhere where I could really, as Nico said, think really broadly about literature and not feel super shoot into one specific thing because I wanted to explore beyond what I'd had exposure to in undergrad.
That's super. I'm just going to say a couple things before we get to Ben Ash and then ask Eli to introduce himself. One is that I just love what you guys are saying about the versatility of the program. It's probably my favorite thing about the English MA program is that it's a place to start figuring out what you want to do within English studies. And you can come, as Nico was saying, Nico is a focused medievalist and has a lot of options to connect with students and faculty interested in medieval studies inside and outside of the English department. But Nico can also, there's enough space in the curriculum that you can take some other classes too in other historical periods. You connect with students focusing on composition pedagogy, rhetoric, writing, linguistics. You're trained to teach first year composition, which is a hugely important skill. And it's a hugely attractive part of our MA program, the teacher training. So it's important to note that our MA program is fully funded. There are a couple students who come every year without funding, but the kind of base of the program, the students we're recruiting are fully funded, and the funding has gotten a lot better. And the funding comes, this is, the kind of thing that you wouldn't know until you are starting to research English MA programs at the University of Tennessee. Like a lot of other programs, the funding comes from training you to teach and then having to teach your own sections of first year composition. At the University of Tennessee, you're both trained in the Writing Center in the first year, and you tutor in the Writing Center in your first year. I think Eli was just tutoring someone. And then you're also trained to teach first year composition. And it's really world-class, rigorous training to teach first year composition. And then in your second year of the MA program, you are the instructor of record in a couple first year composition classes in the fall and the spring of your second year. So the teacher training is serious. It's also work. It's not free money. Like the funding is good, but you're also working hard for the funding. And we don't pretend that it's not a lot of work because it really is, and you're finishing up your degree while being in charge and responsible for a couple first year composition classes each semester. That's a serious responsibility, but it also means that once you leave, you do have serious training teaching first year composition. And so many of our MA students then have used that. They've taught for a while at various places and supported themselves, or they've, for instance, gone on to PhD programs. And when they do, they have serious, rigorous, world-class teacher training to take with them to the PhD program. Ben Ash, let me just like when you were researching, so funding is important, and a lot of people, I tell my own undergraduates at the University of Tennessee when they're applying to English MA programs, I tell them to look for funding. You don't want to take out loans to pay for your English MA. You really want to apply to enough programs that you get full funding. You have funding options. That really is important, and I'm really proud of the funding, the way we've been able to increase the funding for our English MA students. Ben Ash, what were you looking for, and what were you thinking about when you were applying from abroad?
All right. Thank you very much. So very similar to Maggie's experience, I taught high school, and I taught high school literature back in Ghana. I taught the Cambridge Advanced Literature in English program. And so I knew that I was definitely going to go to grad school because that was going to be the next level of my professional advancement. And so I was looking out for a program. And in addition to teaching writing, I also did copy editing and had run this small editing firm back in Ghana. And so I was looking for a program that would allow me to be in a position to both teach and then still do some kind of professional work outside of teaching. And so what I was basically looking for was a program that gives me that option. And I think the University of Tennessee's Rhetoric, Writing, and Linguistics program is one of very few that merges both writing studies, that's composition, rhetoric, and then linguistics, because I have some kind of training in linguistics. And so I teach first language English and second language English. And so, yeah, that was what I was looking for, a program that allows me to do different things. And again, the funding was very important because as an international student, it is very expensive to come study here in the US. And so I was looking for a program that would give me funding and would also, beyond just the tuition waiver and stipend, would also pay my health insurance, because that is also a big part of studying here in the US. And the University of Tennessee offered all of that. So, yeah.
I just before I get Eli to introduce himself, Aaron has asked me in the chat to just explain what it means to be fully funded, and I do think that's important. Fully funded means that your tuition is covered, all your required fees are covered. At the University of Tennessee, we're able to offer you health insurance, and then you also get paid a stipend that helps cover your living expenses. And we've worked really hard, and the university has worked really hard to raise that stipend. But fully funded means your tuition and fees are paid for, plus you get a stipend that we hope will cover your living expenses. But it is something to think, you have to think as you apply to programs about the living expenses in the city you're applying to. And that's been a real struggle in Knoxville, such a cool, hip town these days that the cost of living has increased, and we need to keep increasing our stipend to keep pace. Um, uh, Eli, you can add whatever you want to the conversation. We would love to have your input, but will you start by telling us name, pronouns, where you're coming from, and then where you are in our grad program, in our MA program?
Of course, yeah. So I'm Eli Kibler. My pronouns are he, him. I did my undergraduate at Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm currently specializing, I'm a second year MA, currently specializing in American, I guess it would be 19th, 20th century American and film. And I guess one of the biggest things that, and I think this has sort of probably been covered to a certain extent, either while I was here or right before. One of the biggest draws for me was definitely the teaching experience and then the stipend which comes with it. I think so. I am shooting for PhDs within the coming year, and looking kind of towards that, I thought UT would be the perfect school because of the opportunity it kind of offers when it comes to teaching. I don't think many MA programs kind of offer that, at least not to the kind of extent that UT does. And that was like, I felt like that would, especially when the application cycles, I guess, come for that next kind of step in graduate school, that would easily give me a step up from anyone who, had maybe gone to a master's program which didn't offer the teaching assistantship or associateship that you kind of had to pay out of pocket for, which is, fine, but you have that, at a lot of institutions. But because of that, I mean, I think in general, UT, I would consider it to be probably one of the best MA opportunities in the country because of sort of the opportunity that it gives you and the ability to kind of get all, it feels like you're basically a PhD student, but you're an MA student. That I think, and that is something that I think really just kind of like singled UT out from everywhere else. And that's what I really wanted because when it comes time to apply for PhDs, which is kind of like that's long term kind of my goal. UT was the next step, the perfect next step towards kind of continuing my graduate studies, and for that reason, yeah, I have no regrets coming here. It's been phenomenal. I think also, I don't even know if this has been a question, but one of the things that surprised me about UT was the community. I feel like I found a lot of people here that I really connected with, and based on what I've heard from other family members about who had been to graduate school, they kind of like didn't really have friends in the program. They kind of just went to class or did what they needed to do, and then they went home and they had their own group, that they met somewhere else, and whether it be a book club or something like that. But at UT, I found a community that I've really, really bonded with, people that I've probably going to be lifetime friends with. And in that way, I really that's another reason why I kind of emotionally felt like, yeah, this is where I was meant to be.
That's so great. That's great to hear. I do think we have an amazingly like supportive, vibrant community, and just like our grad students are so smart and cool and kind to one another. And we've talked so much about teaching. I just also want to emphasize before I move on to the next question that all of you have really rigorous and interesting research projects too that you're engaged in as MA or PhD students, that we have a world-class faculty to support the research and scholarship that you're devoted to in whatever field you're working in. And that, what's great is the kind of balance you find in the program between training to teach and then teaching, and also the kind of time management to teach your class and then leave and go to the library and let yourself return to the ongoing research project that you're engaged in. The I we could talk a lot just about the MA program and what what our MA program we feel like it gives to you guys or what you're getting out of it. But I do want to just talk about the application process too, because it's an MA application roundtable, and I do think a lot of our UTK undergraduates and other potential audience members who may watch this video later may really be in, they just want some kind of concrete advice about applying to English MA programs. So I wanted to ask you guys, like, what do you remember about applying when you were applying to MA programs? What was your strategy for applying the programs to the programs you applied to? How many programs did you apply to? How many applications did you think you needed to fill out? So first, like, what was your general strategy for choosing the programs you wanted to apply to, and for deciding how many programs to apply to?
I think I could talk about this a little bit. I think for me, because I'm like right coming out of that whole process, when it came to like deciding what programs I wanted to apply to, I was really looking for kind of programs that would fit two goals, one of which being programs that would give me the opportunity to see where I wanted to go, but also programs that would enable me to go further if that's what I chose. So for me, the big draw for UTK was there were classes that could be offered and there were the opportunity to work with professors who specialize in areas that in other departments I wouldn't have had that same caliber and like world-class support. So having those like options to kind of like ground myself if I want to do a PhD in the future, UT offers all these wonderful classes, and I kind of looked for schools that could kind of both give me the opportunity to experiment, but also help me kind of plan for the future. So if that was something I wanted to do, I was established for that. And I ended up applying to 7 programs, and the way that I worked that out is I wanted to apply to enough programs that I had options to pick, but I really tried to focus on programs where I felt like the location would make me happy, the culture of like where I was would make me happy, and then obviously with the academic considerations as well. And so I kind of tried to look at like a whole broad effect at that point.
Let me get
Um,
one or two more answers to that question, and then I'll add some more specific questions about the application materials, the parts of the application that are required. Go ahead,
I
Talia.
think
When I was choosing programs, I made sure to look at the people who were teaching in the programs to see if there was anyone, because an important part, at least what I was taught in the statement of purpose, which I guess we'll talk more about, is listing things that you're excited about for the school and people you want to work with there. So when I was looking at programs, I basically just thought of places I wanted to live and I looked if there were schools there. And then I went to the English department page and I scrolled through the faculty and I wrote down people who were studying things that seemed related to what I had studied so I could link that to past work and related to things that I wanted to study more. Because I knew that I didn't want to go to a school where nobody was talking about anything that was academically interesting to me. And I also looked at things beyond the faculty. So if there, I know at UT on the website, it talks about different reading groups that we have. And I was an 18th centuryist and I sort of still am. And I saw that there's a Jane Austen Regency ball. I remember talking about that in my application. And then because I did 2 majors in undergrad, any way that I could interact with other departments while still getting an English degree. So looking at what certificates are available or like if you're able to take classes outside of the department that your degree is in.
How many programs did you apply to, Talia? Do you remember?
I think I ended up applying to 10 programs, which was maybe too many. And I also got the advice from a professor in undergrad that I should, if I knew I wanted a PhD, which I did at the time, I should apply to some PhD programs without a master's. So I applied to 8 PhD programs and 2 master's programs. And I'm really happy that I'm in the master's now. So you have options.
That's great. You guys are talking about the faculty, the specific faculty in your areas of focus, but also just faculty working on interesting topics that you think would that you people you might want to take classes with. You're talking about like geography and location and living in a town you want to live where you think you would be happy. You're talking about the other. I mean, everyone, websites have gotten better. You should be able to get a lot of information about the different grad programs online. And you guys are also, so Talia and Nico both talking about like other things that are happening, reading groups, lecture series, events, visiting writers, the Humanities Center, the Marco program. Like those are also things that you can find out about on the website that makes, one department or another seem like a good place for you. And then, of course, we've already talked about funding, and that it really is important to have the kind of like if funding and teacher training is important to you, then that is really important. Too, Talia started to talk about the statement of purpose. So let's continue this discussion. You can talk about how many programs you applied to, and what your strategy was in applying to multiple programs. But I want to start asking too, like of the required application materials. So that would be like for us, and I should also say you can Google like UTK English graduate studies, and that should bring you to our graduate studies page. And there's a link you can click on that says how to apply, and that would tell you what the required application materials are. And they would be transcripts, of course, a statement of purpose, which Talia was talking about, a writing sample of about 20 pages, three letters of recommendation. And then you also need to apply through the official UTK grad admissions portal, which also costs money. There's a $60 application fee, and that's not nothing. So that's something to consider as you're applying to multiple programs. Most of them charge you an application fee. You can write and request application fee rate waivers, but a lot of programs don't have the money to grant all those. So you do need to think about that, how many programs you can afford to apply to, and that's part of the calculus too. So someone, like Maggie or Eli or Ben Ash or Greta, you could talk about like how you thought about which programs to apply to, how many you applied to, but then also like the application materials. We should start talking about that. Like which one were you most nervous about, or which one did you work hardest on, or how did you think about those required application materials?
Can I go? Okay, so first of all, as an international student, the advice that you get from a lot of info sessions is that apply to as many programs as possible. Especially because of the currency differences, it's kind of very expensive. And so what I remember my friend telling me is that it's all or nothing. And so I applied to 10 schools, and I got into a few schools. But UT stood up for me, especially because there were two Ghanaians who were already in the department. And so I kind of spoke to them, and they were like, the department is a very good place to be. And so that was actually what really drew me to UT, just beyond the fact that they offered different paths in terms of the program. But in terms of the application materials, the one that I remember spending so much time on was the writing sample, especially because I was applying to rhetoric writing and linguistics programs. So I felt that I needed to show that I can write. And so I spent so much time in doing my writing sample, and trying to show that I have some kind of research experience. My writing sample was on linguistics, and so I felt that the linguistics aspect of the RWO program, which is missing in a lot of composition programs across the US, made my writing sample fit in. And then for the statement of purpose to, I remember spending 3 months on the statement of purpose because not because I spend the whole 3 months, but the way I write is that I write and put it away and then return to it later with fresh ideas and everything like that. That's how I'm even writing my PhD statement of purposes. And so I spent about 3 months revisiting the statements, trying to see how I can improve on it, trying to focus a lot more on my own experience and how my experience fits into the program and how my research kind of aligns with some research that have been done by faculty in the department. And so I would say that the writing sample and the statement of purpose were the ones that I really spent time on, but the writing sample more for me because I was applying to a writing studies program. Yeah.
I think that's a good strategy. Maggie, Greta, Eli, do you want to?
I can speak real quick. Um, yeah, I'd say for me, it was on my part, probably the statement of purpose. I also, like Vinash, spent like probably 3 months writing that, coming back to it, sending it off to some of my mentors to look at, and they gave me revisions and just kind of this whole like cyclical process. But I felt like the statement of purpose was sort of the glue of the whole application, right? It's where everything kind of came together. And like I would reference like my writing sample in there and, kind of reference all these things like from my CV and kind of put it all together to make this kind of like this 1.5 page document that is me, right? But the other thing that I also found out as I was, getting into programs was the letters of recommendation were also very helpful because they showed from the perspective of full tenured professors like that I had the capability and that I had the personality to kind of engage with this higher level of work. So I would say it's important to get people who know you and who know your work and who can vouch for you in a way that will help the people, who are on the committee, like looking at your application, be like, okay, both kind of professionals would agree or kind of seem to sort of say that this is someone who would be good here. And I think that those can also do a lot to talk about you as a person too, which is something that might not come out as quite as much in your specific, the documents you submit, just kind of your heart, who you are as an individual. That's always very valuable information. And these are people who might know and have experience with that in ways that you don't even realize.
I'm going to build off of that and sort of offer two tips based on my experience and sort of synthesizing other things being said, which is sharing in sort of two different directions. I, especially as a person who spent 5 years as a professional before going back to grad school, um, looked to people I knew who were in grad school for their statement of purpose so that I could see what this looked like because I wasn't taught that in undergrad, and if I had been, I probably would have forgotten. So I needed a recent example, and I had some very kind friends who answered a lot of questions and then also shared their statement of purpose with me so that I could like outline my own and figure out what needed to go in it. So that's one level of sharing is don't be afraid to ask other people if you can see theirs to give you an idea of how to do yours. And then really directly building off of Eli's point, I also had to contact professors who had not worked with me in 5 years to get letters of recommendation. And one of them gave me a very good reminder, which is like, can you remind me, like, can send me your resume or CV and then remind me like some highlights from you when you did the undergrad program here. So then in terms of you sharing, like whoever you do reach out to give you a letter of recommendation, maybe consider, even if you've spoken with them, in a shorter time than like 5 years ago, sharing with them part of your writing sample or your CV or resume or something that will help them to make those really direct connections to whatever it is going into your application packet so that they can boost the things that you want to be boosted to whoever's reading it.
That's great. Greta, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I can jump in and just, I think most people have covered the gamut. I know I was working a 9 to 5, and so one thing that was hard for me was just when am I going to work on this? And so I just decided every day before work, I'm walking to this coffee shop by 8, and I'm going to work for an hour up until I drive to the office. And that worked really well for me. And I just was going to do that until I finished all my applications. I applied to about 10 programs, 9 or 10. And I will say it was really helpful for me reaching back out to faculty for letters of rec. I kind of dialogued with some of them and kind of asked, where do you think I should apply? And that was one way that I determined programs to apply to. And I remember I met up for coffee with one of the professors who I asked to write a letter of rec and just talked to him about the application. And so you can always use those connections in addition to like friends in graduate school. I did the same thing that Maggie did and ask friends to see their statement of purpose and what that looked like. And I know for my writing sample, that was the thing I was most stressed about. And I remember because I didn't have much of a rhetoric concentration in undergrad, and so I didn't really have papers that I felt like fit with that. And so I just decided to choose a paper that I thought was representative of my writing. And I ended up choosing a paper that was not one I had gotten like I'd got a good grade on it, but it wasn't one that like was one of my like top prize papers, but it was the appropriate length. And because it wasn't a top prize paper, I had a lot of feedback from the professor on it that I could like go back into in my computer. And so I spent a lot of time just revising that and cutting it to be the appropriate length. And I had two versions of it, one that was shorter for some of the programs that had a shorter writing sample requirement and one that was a little longer. And so that worked really well. And I guess an encouragement that if your writing sample doesn't totally fit exactly what you're going into, but is representative of your writing, I know that that worked for me. And that was something I was really concerned about in the application process. That worked out fine.
I'll just, so I read a lot of these applications and we really do read the statement of purpose. We really do read the writing sample. I think it's, to be honest, a lot of people will read the first couple pages of the writing sample just to get a sense of what the argument is, the student's kind of like voice and skill as a writer. And if you find yourself reading like 10 pages into the writing sample, you know it's a really good writing sample. But in general, admissions committees have so many applications to get through that they're not going to read every page of every writing sample. They just can't do it and get through the whole pile of applications. So I always tell students to really like think really polish like the first two, 3 pages. The whole sample has to be good because if it's a good writing sample, people will keep reading. But there's that really, I have so many colleagues who will read like the first page or the first 2 pages just to get a sense. The statement of purpose is such a tricky. I mean, Maggie was saying that she had looked for models because it's a mysterious. This happens so often in the academy. You're asked for a new genre of kind of professional genre, and you've never written it before, so you don't know how to write it, and it's so important to get a few models of what a statement of purpose looks like. I always want students to give me some sense of who they are and like where are you coming from? What have you been doing the last few years? What did you do as an undergrad? Like what made you commit to English studies? Was it through teaching? Was it through one particular set of classes? Was it the undergraduate thesis you wrote? So some sense of who you are as a person. And then you do need to have a project that you're describing or an area of focus in rhetoric, writing, linguistics, in literature, in a particular like historical period. You do need to have a sense of like the kinds of texts that you look at, you want to look at as an emerging scholar and the kinds of questions you want to ask about them. And that is really important because a lot of admissions committees, we have slots we need to fill, we need to know, and we need to know that we have faculty members that you could work with. So you do need a kind of like scholarly research project that would allow us to slot you into 20th, 21st century, 18th and 19th century, medieval and Renaissance, or rhetoric, writing, linguistics. In rhetoric, writing, linguistics, which of our faculty members with their different areas of specialty would you connect with and work on a project on? So it isn't, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be it doesn't mean you're committing to that project forever, but it means, you're showing the admissions committee that what a project looks like and how you would go about describing an academic scholarly project in your field that has a specific set of texts that you're investigating and the kinds of questions you like to ask. And then it's also important, and Talia was talking about this. It's important, the best writing samples, statements of purpose. Maggie, I know you got to leave. That is fine. I hope it's a great reading. The best statements of purpose do show that the candidate has paid some attention to the specific program that they're applying to and has spent some time online investigating that program. And you guys have already talked about that in the research you were doing into programs. But if you mention a couple faculty members by name that you think you want to work with, or if you mention something like Nico was talking about the Marco program, or Talia was talking about the Regency Ball, or reading groups, like if you mention those things, that makes a huge difference. It means that the admissions committee feels like they're not just getting the same statement of purpose. Now, you are absolutely going to draft one statement of purpose that you use for all your applications, no question about that. But then you're tweaking each one a little bit. If you have time, it's such a good idea to tweak each one a little bit to make sure that specific program knows that you have spent time thinking about them. It's not an accident that you're applying to their program, and you know which faculty members you might want to study with if you are accepted, and the kinds of things that are happening in that community that you might be able to get involved in. And so the statement of purpose kind of says who you are and what project you would want to carry out if you are admitted to the program. And then the writing sample, serves as evidence for the claims you're making about yourself in the statement of purpose. So, what Greta was saying is right. The writing sample does not have to be an example, doesn't have to be connected to the specific project that you say you want to pursue in your statement of purpose. But if it does give an example of the kind of work you say you're going to do, that's great. If not, it just needs to give a sense of like the strength of your writing, and what it feels like to read your prose and watch you work through complicated questions in your writing sample. But like the best possible application, you would say you wanted to work on a project that you might have already started as you wrote an undergraduate thesis or a seminar paper for an upper level undergraduate course. And the writing sample would be, a paper from that upper level undergraduate course that connects to the area of focus that you want to pursue. Same for the letters of recommendation. They provide evidence for the claims that you're making in your statement of purpose about who you are and what you say you want to pursue. And so ideally, you would get faculty members who work in the specific field you say you want to focus on in graduate school. Again, that's not always perfect. You can't always have a perfect writing sample. You can't always have the perfect letters of recommendation. But, if we require 3 letters of recommendation and 1 or 2 at least are from faculty members in the specific field you want to pursue, that's always a good thing. That kind of like provides evidence for the claims you're making about the field that you want to pursue. Let me go around. Anything you didn't cover, like in the discussion we've had already, like things you wish you had known about applying to English MA programs, or something you wish you had done differently, advice you wish you had gotten, or something you wish you had done differently as you applied to programs? Anyone have a answer to that question?
Yeah, I actually do have like I think for me what would have been really helpful, and I know Maggie touched on it a little bit, was that how complicated the process of getting letter of recommendations can get. It really helps to I know for like a lot of people it's like it's really hard to remember what you've accomplished during undergrad and during your time. I think for me like all of academia kind of blurred together into this like soup. And so writing down your own accomplishments and then for each school like different areas of like for me it was Marco, for someone else it might be the writing center, and then the professors and what like bits and pieces of why you want to work with them. Being able to provide that to your professor will help them craft a letter of recommendation that really speaks to you and your connection to that specific school. Where like Dr. Lee was saying, they might have this blanket template that they're going to use, but seeing that, being able to show your professor why you want that school, why you want to work with those specific people and in that area will help them to kind of make sure that they can deliver for you the best possible like encouragement of why you should be there. And I think the other thing too that I never realized and I wish people told me about was that it A helps to start early, but also B to have a network of people that are also applying. Because when I was applying, it was so helpful to be able to turn to somebody else who was kind of going, even if they're not applying for the same program or the same area in English, and being able to say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help me understand what this is saying? And so having the ability to just kind of commiserate or even just like share this camaraderie as you're kind of applying really helps. And so even if that's like reaching out to like current MA students or former or just people that you know that are also applying, having people you can turn to as like peers to just say, hey, can I get another set of eyes is like really helpful for getting some feedback, but also kind of sharing the experience and passing around resources that you might have overlooked a certain area.
That's great. Someone else? Something you wish you had done differently or advice you wish you had gotten? Go ahead, Talia.
Going off of what Nico said, I think that something I learned very early on in the process is that there's a lot of people out there who want you to have the resources you need. Like my professors from undergrad who wrote my recommendation letters, they were very happy to read over my statement of purpose. They know that academia is really like this labyrinthine, very hard to understand sort of thing for no reason, and they should want to help you. And it's also part of their job, especially if they're a tenured professor, to be writing letters of recommendation. I had a professor who I had to remind of a lot of deadlines, and I was reminded by others that like it's her job to do this. So don't be afraid to ask for help. And also don't be afraid to not go right into grad school from undergrad. You can, it's always going to be there. You can always go to it if you want to.
That's great, Ben Ash.
Um, I think one thing that I would add in addition to, and I didn't do this before applying, but sharing, just like it's been said, sharing your application materials with other people is very important. It allows you get another set of eyes on it, and that's one of the things that I'm doing very much, even as I'm applying to PhD. What I'll add to it is that one of the things that I have come to realize or I've been told is that you can never have a perfect writing sample or statement of purpose. Because one of the things that I tend to do is I tend to stay so much on my writing. I'm like, this is not perfect. Like, this is not good enough. And so at some point, you need to turn it in and to understand that there is always, even right now, if you decide to go back to even your thesis that has been written previously, you will see that there is so much that you could still do with the work. And so getting to that point where you feel that, okay, it's time for me to submit is very important. And then reaching out to faculty. Sometimes the faculty may not reply your email, but if you're lucky and that faculty is on your is on the admissions committee, they by seeing your name, they kind of remember, okay, I received an email from this person. They were very much interested in this particular program. And so reaching out to faculty, sometimes they would reply, sometimes they would not reply, but that is also very important. Yeah.
Another great set of bit of advice there. Greta.
Yes, my bit really piggybacks off of what Ben Ash just said, because I was going to add that I waited to do this until the spring to programs that I knew I was admitted to, but I reached out to a lot of them and I was able to do a road trip with my mom and kind of go see a lot of the campuses and set up meetings with faculty or even current students. I remember Dr. Lee very kindly met with me at UTK and connected me with a current student who I then was like the one person I knew when I moved to Knoxville. And so we became friends and also connected me to faculty. And so I was going to say that once you're admitted to programs, that's a great thing to do. But I, in retrospect, even wish that I had done that before being admitted. Not necessarily the visits, but reaching out more and starting to get to know some of the people I might be working with at the schools. I'm really interested in writing center research and writing center studies. And so one thing I did, and I did this once I was admitted, but my advice would be to do it as you apply, is I tried to Zoom or meet with all of the writing center directors of the various schools just to see who I felt that I clicked with or would work with well. And I'm sure Ben Ash is right that there would be varying degrees of response rates to those sort of reach outs. But even that would probably be helpful to know for certain programs, if people were responding to you or not, and kind of what sort of welcome you felt that you were getting. So I know for me that was a huge factor in my decision making of which program to ultimately go with. And I think that also could have helped me narrow programs that I was applying to.
That's great. Does anyone else? Yeah, Eli has something to add.
My last bit would probably just to be when it comes to applications, like make sure you start early. I would recommend if you even can, just start thinking and drafting over the summer when you might have more time because I think the due dates, especially when they happen like right at the start of December, or like they really can creep up on you. And if you haven't kind of put in the time, because I mean these just take time. If you haven't put in that time, it that might end up showing on the application itself. And it never hurts just to kind of get a head start, even when you don't think you might need to. That's usually what I've found to be just so essential.
This is all such great advice, and I like the balance we're striking between, start early, work on all your materials as much as you can, but also, as Ben Ash was saying, at a certain point, you just have to submit the application. Can't agonize about your writing sample forever. You've done good work on it, and it is a strong, accurate representation of you and your talents, and you just need to hit submit and let people read it and decide. I also like this balance between, don't hesitate to reach out to faculty at the programs you're applying, but also don't be too discouraged if they're just slammed with work. People can't always respond, but it does, you will get some responses, and that might make a difference to you, that connection that you're making. And Talia was talking about your recommenders. It is important to remind them. They won't always respond immediately, but it is part of their job. One last thing I was going to add is that I always ask, asking for letters of recommendation can be a little bit mysterious. I always ask the students for whom I'm writing a letter to share with me a draft of their personal statement and their writing sample. So send me your application materials so I can see what you're saying about yourself, what claims you're making, and I can try to write a letter of recommendation that will enhance and reinforce those claims. And Maggie was saying this before she left too. I always ask students, do you have sometimes they're in class with me that semester and it's not a problem. I have all their essays on my laptop, but I'll ask them, will you send me the best paper you wrote for me so I can remember exactly what you did for me in a class and talk specifically in the letter about an essay that you wrote for me. We're almost out of time, and I can see Aaron's here, and I want to thank Aaron Elizabeth Smith again for organizing this, and I want to thank all of you guys, Nico, Ben Ash, Eli, Talia, Greta, and Maggie, who has left us to go to a poetry reading, but all of you all for taking the time to come together to talk about English MA programs and applying to them. It's just been great, and your advice, I think, has been really wise and perceptive and helpful.
Thank you too.
I want to echo all of that. This has been an absolute joy. Wonderful advice. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your evening tonight to chat. And yeah, I appreciate your time and your energy towards the program.
Can I say one last thing, Aaron, is that if we have UTK undergrads or anyone out there who happens to see this video who's interested applying to grad programs at UTK, Knoxville, University of Tennessee, they shouldn't hesitate to reach out to me, blee15@utk.edu. You can find my email on the website, and I'm always delighted to hear from you.